Hello and welcome to the Habicast, Habitat Pinellas and West Pasco's new show, highlighting our mission, our homeowners, and our partners that help make everything happen. I'm your co-host Morgan, and I'm here with our president and CEO and my co-host Mike Sutton. Hey, Mike.
What's going on, Morgan? How are you?
Good. Looks like you got some new digs happening.
Some new digs.
Yeah.
We moved into our new office here at Habitat. So we've been growing so much over the last few years that we no longer had any meeting space. We actually built our conference room out into offices, and we literally were on top of each other in a smaller office. And so we've relocated our administrative offices to a much larger facility, and we're actually going to take the old setup that we were using as our office and build out an education center, which we'll definitely be talking about over the next couple months. But we really see that the education component of what we do is the most important piece to the homeowner's long-term success. And so we want to create a facility and a program. We want to deepen our program, really, and this is going to allow us to do that. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's really going to elevate the experience, and like you said, that's the Habitat difference with the program. The home buyer education that our homeowners receive and all the things they learn, from budgeting to how to be a good neighbor, like these are things that they're not going to be able to learn and kind of learn even more in the education center. But they're also going to have the home buying selection area that I'll be working with.
Neat.
I'm really excited. I'll be working with our Chief Construction Officer, Gabby Camacho, on that. It'll be a really fun project.
What's really cool is, I think when anyone goes out and buys a home, new construction home, you typically have some opportunities to pick out some colors and countertops and cabinets and all that stuff. And our homeowners, they do have that opportunity, but we're actually going to be creating an experience for them to kind of walk through that has the different samples of colors and countertops, cabinets, tile, carpet, all that stuff, so that they can get a much richer and deeper experience as they're going through the home buying process. So I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be so awesome. It's going to be a cool experience for the homeowners and just add a little bit more of a excitement to their whole process.
And that location is still going to be within our Clearwater Restore off of 49th and Ulmerton. And then transitioning to the Restore, June is coming up, and we're getting ready for hurricane season already. Can you believe it?
Gosh, it's crazy that we're at that period of time already in the year. It's weird because I remember as we kind of turned the corner into 2021, I was like, this year's going to move so slow because of the pandemic, and how the heck is it already June? It's pretty crazy. So, but yeah, with the Restore, I think what's really exciting is that we have two Restores that are fully operational right now, our Clearwater and Palm Harbor locations, and tons of deals, tons of specials. And so as people are getting ready for the hurricane season, as they're, in the full swing of things for the summer, you never know what you can find. And so if you're doing some home repairs, maybe you need a new patio set for your pool or what have you, it's a great place to check out before you go pay retail for items. So, and I feel like I can do this since I'm the CEO. If anybody goes into the Restore and they mention that they watch this podcast, we'll give them 25% off.
What a deal.
What a deal.
All kinds of, like Mike said, there's so many different unique things that you can find in the Restore, especially if you have, summer's coming up and maybe you want to get the kids to do some DIY projects or, spruce up the garage. But with hurricane prep, we are going to have all kinds of supplies, including tarps, bungees, storm shutters, all of those things to get homeowners ready for hurricane season. But yes,
exciting.
Mention the podcast and get 25% off.
I mentioned the two locations. I think it's really important to share with people that our location in Newport Richey is closed down temporarily. So we sold the property in which our Restore was located on. And we are moving out onto US 19. So we'll have water one and find just as much amazing items and great deals. So
That's exciting. And speaking of Newport Richey, we actually have a special guest on today. You want to tell a little bit about Frank?
Yeah, so Frank Starkey. If you're from Pasco County, you definitely, actually, if you're from the Tampa Bay region, you know the Starkey last name. Starkey Ranch is obviously was a big part of Pasco County, and we're fortunate at Habitat to have Frank Starkey serve on our board of directors, and he has a really neat background in architecture and design, and he's helping us with a number of the projects we have going on. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about his family, some of the work, and some of the ways that they've helped Pasco County, and then kind of what led him to Habitat and how he's involved with us. So he's a great guy. He's on our board. Starting July, he'll actually be our board vice chairman. So we got to be really nice to him because my annual review is coming up in a couple weeks. So we want to make sure. So.
Got it. Well, let's bring him in. I'm excited to talk about him.
Awesome.
Hey.
Hello.
What's going on, Frank?
Well, I just was, while y'all were chatting away about cool Habitat stuff, I was cleaning up the area around behind my desk to make it more TV presentable. And now I see that it's only this much showing. So that's good because there's a lot of junk behind my desk that I was not able to get taken care of.
There you go. Well, you're obviously in your office in downtown Newport Richey. I see the bricks behind you.
Love it.
Cool brick wall. The chalkboard made with barn wood from the ranch that my sister-in-law made for me.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Wow.
Cool. Well, thanks for jumping on with us today. We thought it would be fun to just kind of talk a little bit about your background and your family and kind of some of the stuff you guys have done in Pasco County and really Pinellas as well. But I guess maybe for those that may not be familiar with Frank Starkey and the Starkey family, you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about you guys and a little bit of background?
Sure. I am the grandson of J.B. Starkey, for whom the Wilderness Park is named, and also Starkey Road down in Largo, where he had a ranch that starting in 1920 up through the late 1950s, he operated. And my dad grew up there, and at the time it was just a dirt section line road on the east side of what was then called Long's Bayou, which is now Lake Seminole. And in the 1930s, he and some investor partners started buying land up in Pasco County, and they ultimately bought 16,000 acres up here, a lot of which had been timberland that they bought that had gone back to taxes. So got it for what seems like astronomically cheap prices back in days when people weren't really buying a whole lot of land in the late 1930s. And by the 60s, he owned that all by himself because his partners, who were a generation older, had passed on. So I grew up on the ranch in Odessa, but Newport Richey was our hometown where we went to school and church and had our social life. And when I was real little, we shopped at the IGA grocery store that's 2 doors down from where my office is now. And so I kind of grew up with a combination rural existence, living in the country on a what I jokingly call a 16,000 acre single family live work lot, and then kind of had a small town experience in Newport Richey, but also a suburban one because by the time I was coming along, the West Pasco subdivisions were popping up, and that was where all my friends lived. And so the buddies that I went to school and church with lived in subdivisions that were mostly retirement, but still had other families nearby. And I was always fascinated by the idea that you could ride a bike to other kids' houses, because my nearest neighbor was a half mile away, and that was only one family. And then other than that, it was miles in any direction to anybody else. So I grew up with a strong, appreciation for nature and wide open spaces, but also a real longing for living in a neighborhood and having friends and community around me. So
Yeah.
but I also, my professional interest was architecture. Going back to when I was in fourth grade, I just wanted to build things.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so as I got out of architecture school and the ranch was starting to be, it was becoming obvious that the ranch was going to have to be developed, and it was going to be developed one way or the other. And my brother and I decided that, and our family, but my brother and I were both decided to go into the business of development so that we would have a hand in what got developed on the ranch. So what we really combined was that love for preserving the natural environment, and but also a passion for neighborhoods and real community, and also civic engagement and giving back to the community, which was another family value that we kind of had been passed down through our generations from our great grandparents. William Straub, who Straub Park in St. Peter's named after, is my great grandfather. And so my middle name is Straub. So I have that lineage. And so between the cattle ranching history and William Straub and my my granddad Starkey was also big into public spaces and parks and giving back to the community in that way. So we just kind of rolled all those things together into what we call new urbanism, what is called new urbanism, where you're able to preserve large areas of land because you concentrate development in walkable neighborhoods where the form of the place really fosters people knowing their neighbors, having a more diverse community than a typical subdivision, which is about sectioning off people into different slices of demographic profile, and then having fostering the formation of a civic life in the community. So that's where I got into the development world.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's so awesome. I didn't know about the Straub background. So you are Pasco and Pinellas, so you fit right in with the affiliate, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I had no idea, but that's what
Yeah.
I love about doing these podcasts is that you learn so much about people that you had no idea. Like I always knew the Starkey connection, obviously, by the last name and conversations we've had, but I had no idea about Straub Park. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'd always known about Straub Park, and in about 15 years ago, or 15 or 20 years ago, I read a book called Visions of Eden, which is about the history of planning and land use and city planning and urban development in Pinellas County up through the 1970s. And I learned that my great grandfather Straub was a huge figure in that, because in addition to convincing the city to buy up the waterfront, he also was, because he was the publisher of the St. Pete Times, so he had a bully pulpit there to kind of rabble rouse for different causes. And one of them was to get Pinellas separated from Hillsborough County, because at that time, Hillsborough County and what's now Pinellas County were all one county. And Pinellas was so geographically isolated that it always was kind of getting the short end of the stick. So he really, and there were no bridges across the bay and things like that. So he advocated for Pinellas independence from Hillsborough County, which probably led to some of the cross bay rivalry that we still have today. But but also shortly after the Pinellas County was formed, he urged the county to form a county parks board, which was one of the first and is still one of the best county parks systems in the country. But then near and dear to my heart, he was a big advocate for city planning, and he convinced the city council to start a city planning board, which was an unheard of thing at those times. There was no zoning, there was no city planning the way there is today, the way there's too much of today, in fact. And they said, okay, great, we'll start a board. You get to chair it. So the first thing he did, though, was hire John Nolan, who was the preeminent town planner of the 1920s, who did a plan for St. Petersburg, which was and then there's a long story about how it, about the road to getting it adopted, and it was really never adopted with any teeth. So the city plan that you see in St. Pete, while it has some lovely attributes, was not the John Nolan plan, which would have been more wonderful, and in fact would have. He proposed that the barrier islands should have been purchased and reserved as nature preserves, and maintaining their protective, in storms they would protect the coastline, and it would all be public recreation lands. Sure. And he also was very ahead of his time in designing and planning good neighborhoods for African Americans, which didn't go well with the locals, as you can imagine. But it was, for its day, a pretty progressive approach to city planning. So anyway, when I found out that my great-grandfather had hired John Nolan, who was a professional hero and luminary in the new urbanist world, I was just amazed. So that was a fun thing to find out, even about my own family members.
You need to write a book.
I know.
It's kind of. History lesson.
We can do an audio book, and we can use this for the opening chapters.
Good. I need a ghostwriter.
Too funny. So, Frank, obviously you touched on the fact that Newport Richey is your hometown, but and I know how passionate you are about Newport Richey and the downtown community. Why do you tell us why you choose to live in downtown Newport Richey?
As we finished up the planning on the ranch, the development that's called Starkey Ranch, which is under development now, our family took through the entitlement process and planning process, but then we sold that land to another developer who's developing it. So we're not the developers of that. And that kind of happened before, during, and after the recession, that whole planning it and then selling it. Mm-hmm. And coming out of that, Trey and I were both kind of left to do what we wanted to do, or figure out what we wanted to do next for our own next chapters. He started a blueberry farm on a piece of land that was part of the ranch. It's Starkey Blueberry Farms. Great place to go pick blueberries, and then they also now have you-pick blackberries, which are going to be coming into season shortly. Oh, wow. And they've started a produce market and barn, which is a bar, and one of the coolest places to hang out around. It's really a neat place. But I still had a passion for urban development, and was frustrated that the pace and opportunities for developing traditional neighborhood developments in greenfield pastures was not what it once was. Excuse me. And I also realized that there were a lot of good places with pre-World War II towns that already had the infrastructure, the street grid, the downtowns already in place. So, and that those places needed to be revitalized as kind of low-hanging fruit because the structure was already there. So starting about 2010 to 12, I started looking around the state for small towns with good urban bones and leadership that knew what they were doing and that had some potential to grow. Mm-hmm. And ended up really, I had a couple projects. I looked at other places around the state, but then figured out that Newport Richey in my own backyard was really, kind of really right there where it needed it and needed to be revitalized, and that I was in a good position to do so. I knew the town, I knew the players, I knew how, I just kind of, people knew me. I had a decent reputation professionally coming in. So I decided to start doing projects in downtown. And I really concentrate in a very focused way on what I call my farm, which is basically the original part of town that was laid out in 1911. where the streets are gridded. There's a main street. Orange Lake and Sims Park are the main urban amenity downtown.
Mhm.
It really kind of has all the same ingredients as downtown St. Pete, but in miniature. It's got a waterfront park, a central business district that's nearby, very good close-in neighborhoods, a good street grid, and even a pink hotel from the 1920s. So that's being renovated right now. The Hacienda is going to open later this summer. It's going to be a great addition to downtown. So I moved into town. My husband and I got a house that's 4 blocks from Main Street. My office where I'm sitting right now is right on Main Street. The first big project that I did is apartments right on Orange Lake, half a block north of where I'm sitting. And then we bought the old IGA grocery store that from when I was a kid, and we renovated that and turned it into a natural food store. So we brought a grocery store back to downtown, which there hadn't been since 1980. A microbrewery, taco place. There was a CrossFit gym in it, which outgrew the space and has moved out to bigger quarters. And then we have another office in there for a home security company. So did that, and then I'm right now in the process of redeveloping another building downtown into a restaurant and offices above. So
Awesome.
Nice.
But it's the since I've lived here and work here and have developed good friendships here. My best friend lives down the block from me, and we ride our bikes up and down Grand Boulevard in the evenings at least once a week, and it's such a pleasant quality of life to be able to. I mean, I rode my bike to the office today, and even though it's hot as blazes outside. And, so it's just a nice quality of life to have everything so close. I haven't had this kind of luxuriously easy lifestyle since college, where everything is within 300 acres or so.
I'm so blown away by downtown Newport Richey. It's embarrassingly, before we started having conversations of merging the Habitat Pinellas and West Pasco Habitat organizations together, I hadn't been to downtown Newport Richey since I was probably a kid. And so, and I think, back then there were a lot of boarded up places and just not a lot of traffic, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember pulling onto Main Street for the first time to meet Cobus, our former executive director from West Pasco Habitat. And he told me to meet him in downtown. And I just kind of went in blind, and I was blown away by how cute and the downtown area is with all the redevelopment. And your project was just kicking off. The Hacienda Hotel was just kind of kicking off with that renovation, and it's just been phenomenal to see. So I know Newport Richey sometimes has a stigma, but the downtown area is such a huge asset for Pasco County.
Well, you can be forgiven for not having been here because a lot of people haven't been here. But invariably, when people come here with fresh eyes, either their first time or the first time in a long time, they have the reaction that you did. They say, "Gosh, this place is so has so much potential. Why isn't it totally kicking butt?" And that's I as an urbanist understand that people love this kind of environment, and on one hand, it's inevitable that a place like this is going to be revitalized sooner or later, but on the other hand, somebody's going to make it happen. So I decided it was worth the gamble to come in and jump in and start helping to make it happen. So, and that's starting to bear fruit, which is really gratifying, but also just pleasant as a place to be.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit. So you obviously got involved with Habitat. So tell us a little bit about what the attraction is there from your perspective to be involved with an organization like Habitat.
I got to know about Habitat back when I was in high school. The pastor and his wife of our church here in Newport Richey were involved with it. They were from Tallahassee originally, and they had so they were close connections to planes, and so that was when I first. So I've kind of always known about Habitat since then, and I've always been simpatico with the mission of Habitat as a person whose abiding passion is making things and building buildings, and also making community and the holistic meaning of home. I think Habitat is a terribly important ministry in itself, but also model for how to produce housing as well as bolster families and people, homeowners, homeowners, and not just homeownership. And so it really builds the people as well as the places. And so in fact, that's the name of my company. So you can people, places. So that's just kind of core mission to my avocation and professions in life.
Sure. So with your background in and obviously you're connected in with the real estate, world in a lot of ways. What do you see as kind of the future for Pasco County? We know on the eastern side it's going crazy over in Wesley Chapel and that and that kind of thing. But on the western side of Pasco, we know affordable housing is a huge issue, but kind of what do you see happening over the next 15, 20 years in Pasco County?
I don't know what I see happening, but I know I know what the challenges are, or I can speak to what I think the challenges are. Pasco has, like most of Florida, has historically been a growth dependent county. And when I was a kid, I was born in 1969, but in the late 60s, but definitely in the 70s and 80s, West Pasco was built out very quickly with scads of modest single-family houses that were geared towards retirees from the Midwest and the Northeast. Lots of retiring auto workers from Detroit, for example, and then people moving down from New York primarily. And then their grandkids would move down, and that was who I grew up going to school with. So I had, probably half of my friends were from Michigan, and the other half were from New York or Pennsylvania or New Jersey. And that was just so. The other odd thing about growing up here was that the backgrounds of people that I grew up with very few Floridians, native Floridians. So we were the unusual ones compared to the people who arrived by interstate. And so all of those houses that were built for retirees, as the retirees aged out to the great beyond, those became de facto affordable housing for families to move into. But the social services like schools and churches and commercial hadn't really been built for families. So the big challenge in the 90s and 2000s, as those retiree neighborhoods became family neighborhoods, was how do you provide services for them? And also there was a shortage of park space and amenities to serve a different age bracket. So the county has done a lot to both the school board and the county, and I'm talking about the unincorporated portions. I'll talk about the cities in a second, but so they've done a lot. They've done a lot to kind of go back and retrofit that. But that's an ongoing challenge. So there are now a lot more park and recreation opportunities in West Pasco than there were when I was a kid. And a lot of times they've had to go in at very high cost to put those things in after the fact. But at the same time, a lot of the areas in West Pasco, the neighborhoods in West Pasco, have declined in quality and in income, and some to a really drastic degree, like Town and Country Villas, where Habitat is working so much now, but also some of the other neighborhoods that there's the problem of mass-produced suburban development is you have 1,000 houses that are all the same age and the same quality level, which was very high to begin with. And then as the retirees who lived in them initially aged, they didn't necessarily keep up with them very well. So you had a lot of deferred maintenance. And then they just kind of, when you have a lot of the same product that's all comparable, the way that sales comps work, and I know sales comps is a big issue for Habitat all the time, because that determines everything about whether you can get a mortgage or not. That every mortgage, every sales, the value of any given home is only as high as the last lowest sale. So it just kind of ratchets down and down and down and down and down, and which has a lot of bad knock-on effects from just deferred maintenance, because because a homeowner has no motivation to maintain their house because the value isn't going to go up anyway. And then you have slumlords come in and purchase properties and run them down even worse and exploit vulnerable homeowners in the process. And you get a lot of bad spirals in the wrong direction. So I think that to get back to your question, I think the challenge for the next 20 years is not east of Little Road, it's west of Little Road. And how do we, as a county, revitalize the suburban neighborhoods that are now 50 years old, and in tough shape physically and also demographically, because they've become uniformly low income, and don't have the economic diversity that makes neighborhoods more stable, and also helps lift people out of poverty and helps just make a more resilient society. So,
I would assume the rising water is also an issue for that western.
That doesn't help either.
Yeah, because I mean, anything that's west of US 19 is technically, it's technically underwater, right? I mean, and that's a huge challenge as well.
Yeah, it's underwater during storms. It's not as if it's all inundated and Little Road is going to become a beachfront someday. That's just not how. So yes, that's another big challenge to it. Not all of the land in the western part of the county is low, and a lot of the old parts of Newport Richey, the town, like all old towns, is situated on fairly high land with a river that goes through it. I mean, that's why towns end up being on rivers with high land around them, because they are the best places the safest places from storms, and the places where you can have trade and commerce. But so not everything is going to be subject to flooding every time there's a king tide and a west wind.
Sure.
But enough of it is, and the more immediate specter is that insurance companies will start pulling in what they're going to do there. So that's going to create a whole different crisis that kind of layers on top of everything I just described demographically. And really, it will force, one way or another, it's going to force a rethinking of the way that the development pattern just a rethinking of the development pattern, which currently is uniformly over everything high and low, and it will not be able to be sustained that way.
Gotcha. Well, I think when we look at what Habitat is doing up in Pasco County, I think the exciting part is that we are able to find property, as you mentioned, kind of some of those neighborhoods that need a little bit of love and attention, and we're able to do infill development all throughout, specifically Newport Richey, kind of some of those older neighborhoods, and it's worked well for, I think, our homeowners and for the city and for us. So we look forward to continuing to do that. Our project, as you mentioned, Town and Country Villas, is one that has had a lot of starts and stops and some challenges. And really, oftentimes it's because of the fact that we are in the floodplain and we're having to build those homes up, and it needs some improvement to infrastructure,
Right.
Which is a lot of what you just covered. So Habitat's feeling it firsthand.
Yeah. But also, I think the opportunity and the necessity at Town and Country it's actually a place where we'd have the opportunity to reconsider that development pattern. And
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you've already the houses Habitat has built have already changed the character of the neighborhood, not just because they're new, but because they're stick-built houses on high foundations that will be much more resilient in the long term than the previous than the original phase of development. And that was mobile homes that were ancient and in a lot of states of disrepair.
Yeah.
So that we're already changing that. And I think the other opportunity, as we've talked about, is to introduce different densities of housing in there as well.
Yeah.
Maybe not executed by Habitat, but facilitated by the fact that Habitat is there.
Yeah, I think there's some great opportunity there. So it's pretty exciting.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank.
Oh, I was going to say, by the way, Bill Grammatica is calling me. I called him earlier today. Big Habitat partner. If you look at the location of that from a pure greedy developer standpoint, you got a Starbucks out in front, one of the best Publixes in West Pasco, to the south, and a whole host of destinations within walking distance. It has a very high walk score. It's a very desirable location for development. So I think that unfortunately appraisers haven't yet figured out how to haven't figured that out, which is really hurting Habitat. But I think once that does get figured out, then I think long term, that's a good place to be, even though it's got some challenges for its redevelopment.
Yeah, our homeowners that have moved there, and I think we've completed 9 homes now with another one scheduled for June. They love it, and like you said, the walkability component's huge, so they can literally walk to Publix. It's
it's a place it's a place one could easily live without a car, or with only one car in the house instead of 2 or 3.
Now, if I was that if I lived a couple hundred feet from Starbucks, it probably wouldn't be a good thing. But at the same time, it would be very convenient. So one of the things that we always ask folks as we kind of conclude our podcast is what does home mean to them? And so we talk a lot about at Habitat the power of home. And the value of home. And so when you take a step back and really think about the word home, tell us what that means to you.
Home in the sense of dwelling, to me, is a place where you just have a sense of safety and belonging and security. But I also think home is the neighborhood and the community, and having people around, even if you don't know them. I just met one of my immediate next door neighbor, who's the entrance to his house is kind of catty corner, and part of his house is rental. But he just came and introduced himself to me today. Super nice guy. I wish I'd gotten to know him sooner. And even though he's just knowing that I have a good neighbor there, and I have good neighbors all around me. And then I have some of my neighbors are great friends, like my friend Ryan that I mentioned earlier. So that to me is also home, the neighborhood and walking out and having people around who you share something in common with, even if it's just the place you live.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Frank, thank you for spending some time with us. Obviously, we had some technical issues today, and we lost Morgan. She's floating around somewhere out there. Got technology. But thank you for everything that you do, not only for Habitat, but our entire community. Obviously, as we talked about today, Newport Richey is a better place because of the involvement of yourself and your family, and just thank you for everything that you continue to do. So
well, thank you.
appreciate.
And thank you to Habitat, because Newport Richey is a better place because of Habitat as well.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. And thanks again for being with us.
Great talking to you, Mike. Have a great day.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.